Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Liz Ma in San Francisco, California. Liz is the CEO of Net Impact, a global nonprofit that empowers a new generation to work for a sustainable future. In 2011, Liz was named one of the 100 most influential people in business ethics by Ethisphere. Liz is also a board member of the World Environmental Center. Prior to leading Net Impact, Liz's professional experience included strategic consulting to nonprofits with the Bridgespan Group, as well as fundraising and direct marketing for nonprofit organizations in New York City and Washington, D.C. She holds a BA from Yale University and an MBA from Columbia Business School and UC Berkeley. Well, Liz, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's so nice to meet you. I mentioned before we got started, I am a huge fan of Net Impact. And in 2004, I was actually a charter member at Pepperdine. And years later, I helped to start a different chapter in Memphis. But I think maybe some of our listeners have not heard of Net Impact. If we haven't heard of it, can you share a little bit about what Net Impact is?
Absolutely. I think it helps to hear our origin story to fully understand Net Impact. We were founded back in 1993 by a group of MBA students who at the time really felt that they wanted to do more than just make a lot of money, which was very not normal in business schools back then. So they decided to form a network of like-minded people who were interested in using their skills for more than money and making a difference, and they founded local chapters and decided to convene annually at a conference. So since then, over the 23 years, we have grown to include many different folks beyond MBAs as well. We have undergraduates involved. We have graduate students from different disciplines. We have professionals, some of whom went to grad school, some of whom didn't. But the uniting feature is that these are all folks who want to use their skills and careers to drive change and think of their careers as more than just a way to make a living, but really to make a change in the world. We see social change as a lifetime commitment, and we support that through a number of different programs here at Net Impact. One is through our 300 local chapters, which are volunteer-led and provide a number of different networking opportunities and programs for individuals to connect with each other and learn about different topics related to impact and sustainability. We also have a big annual conference that has grown over the years to include over 2,500 people, and it's a great inspirational few days of learning and networking as well. And then we also have a number of programs that we roll out here from our headquarters that are delivered via local events in the chapters as well as digitally to try to train people on how they can use their skills to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, that's great. So, and when it comes to issues that are important to Net Impact members, I mean, you kind of talked about, they want to make a difference. In what ways are they looking to make a difference? I mean, I think it's a fairly broad range, but what are some of the things that you see?
It is a fairly broad range. We have people who care about all kinds of different topics. I will say that there are 5 different issues that we have focused on as an organization this year based on member interest as well as other opportunities that we've seen. And I think that will give you a nice picture of the range of different topics that the Net Impact community cares about. One is food systems and how our planet can continue to feed a growing population. The second is racial equity, focused more here in the United States and how we can be a more racially equitable society. The third is climate change. The fourth is sustainable transportation. And the fifth is our long-term national fiscal debt. So you can see from those, I think, that there's really a broad range of issues that Net Impact members get involved with, and many more also beyond the 5 I listed.
Yeah, that's so great. I think it's really interesting to sort of take those ideas and bring them into your career. And that's, to me, one of the really nice things that Net Impact does is help to encourage their members to kind of keep those values in mind as they're looking for a place to work. Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, you were actually named as one of the most 100 influential people in business ethics, which is awesome. But very often we associate things like ethics with nonprofit organizations only. Can you talk a little bit about why ethics are important to our business lives, even if we happen to work in a corporation?
Yes, I think they're incredibly important. We spend the majority of our waking hours working, and that's where we use our best brain cells and our creativity. And it's I think critical for people to feel like what they're doing is making a positive impact on the world in some way, and doing that in a way that adheres to their values and ethics as a person. In addition, just from a societal point of view, businesses have a huge potential to transform the world for good or for bad. And businesses don't operate in a vacuum. They are responsible and accountable to the environment, our natural resources, to the communities they operate in, to their workforce, and businesses have a stake in all the issues that we all care about and really need to be part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, years ago, business schools maybe didn't have a huge focus on ethics either when you'd go through and get your MBA a long time ago. Are you seeing that more schools are starting to put ethics into their curriculum, or that people who have MBAs are starting to think about this issue more and more?
Definitely. In fact, they're going beyond ethics, and business schools today are offering all kinds of courses and extracurriculars on topics like social entrepreneurship, on topics like sustainability. So business schools are really recognizing today that businesses have a role in solving problems, not just trying to avoid them. Part of that is really driven by the generation of people going to business schools. The younger generations expect that part of their working life, whether it's in a business or a nonprofit organization, will be about bringing their values to work. And I am just delighted to see business schools and businesses evolving to places where that is more the reality.
I totally agree. Well, I often talk with job seekers who have been working in the same kind of career for, anywhere from 10 to 20 years, and they really take a step back and they evaluate and they realize that the career that they've had doesn't necessarily align to their personal values and what's really important to them. And they get to a place, and sometimes it happens, anywhere between 35 and 45 years old, but they get to a place where they say, I really want to take some steps to change my life and change what I'm doing so that what I do day to day at work does align with how I look at the world. For someone who may be listening that is in that situation, what advice do you have for us on how to sort of start that transition in our lives?
Yeah, I think one of the first questions to ask yourselves is, what salary do you really need at this point in your life? Not what have you been making necessarily, but what do you really need to be content with your priorities? Because perhaps you need to change and stay in the for-profit sector, which typically pays higher salaries. But if not, maybe you can look more at the social sector, at nonprofits or government, and find more meaning there. Even if you do decide on a nonprofit, there's a huge range of nonprofits out there, including how much money they will pay. So thinking carefully about the kind of organization that you might be willing to work for, and what kind of salaries you think will be typical in that organization is helpful as well. There are a lot of public salary surveys on the nonprofit sector, and of course resources like Glassdoor and GuideStar, where you can do more research on what salaries will pay. But I would encourage people to think of that earlier rather than later. I know as a person who's interviewed a lot of people trying to transition from for-profit to nonprofit, sometimes people come in with somewhat unrealistic expectations about compensation. But after salary is not the only thing, of course, but after figuring out your salary limits, I would suggest trying to gain some more relevant experience. Again, I've seen a lot of job sector switchers, and sometimes they assume that just because they had some fancy corporate labels on their resume, they can do anything in a smaller nonprofit organization, and that's not true. Just the way that a nonprofit person can't necessarily switch into a fancy corporate job. There are a number of ways to gain experience that you can do even while working on the side. For example, you could do a meaty pro bono project with a local organization and gain some great experience in what it means to help a nonprofit using your skills to do a strategy plan or marketing plan or whatever might be most applicable to you. You might be able to serve on the board of a local organization, which also is a great way to get to know specifically the nonprofit sector in this case, and gain some great experience in that way. So I would try those things out, see if the nonprofit sector specifically is for you, and if not, look at other different kinds of companies out there, because there are definitely a lot of for-profit companies where you can feel more fulfilled and more aligned with your values, and it's a question of just identifying which companies those are.
Yeah, so when it comes to the nonprofits, when we are going and interviewing, and if we have especially like a corporate background, a question that often comes up, is during the interview is, how is it that you're qualified to work at a nonprofit with your for-profit background? And it's a pretty big barrier at times for a job seeker. I mean, how do you recommend that we kind of tackle that? I mean, you mentioned getting on the board and learning, identifying the nonprofits that you're interested in. But when we encounter people that can't really picture us as a corporate person coming into a nonprofit, I mean, what can we do?
I do think it's critical to show that you are serious enough that you have spent some time volunteering with an organization, and ideally not necessarily sort of as a weekend, one-off project, but doing a meaty project. And even if you don't think you might be able to get a board seat, doing a pro bono project on the side is something that can be really rewarding and also show your dedication to fitting into the nonprofit community. So I would really recommend that. If that's not going to work, doing your homework and really learning, what does it mean to be a finance or marketing or, project management professional in a nonprofit. Talk to people who have those roles and understand it and connect the dots from your past experience to what you see as a nonprofit sector, so that when you go into an interview, you can talk about your knowledge of the nonprofit sector and what you think will be different and why you think your skills will be helpful even in this different environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned a couple of websites also in terms of researching salary. One is Glassdoor.com, which I think probably everybody is familiar with. But the one that you mentioned that people may be less familiar with is GuideStar.com. And I know that, if you register for a free account on GuideStar, you can often look at the tax document for a nonprofit. And inside that document, it gives you an idea of how much they are making in donations and what their most senior level executive is making. Is there any other data that they have related to salary that's on GuideStar?
Mm-hmm. It's guidestar.org, and it does list only the top compensated employees.
Okay.
However, I think that will give you a good guidepost as to what kind of salary range we're talking about. In addition, there are a number of publicly available salary surveys out there, which will show you, based on geography and based on sector, or based on, I should say, sort of type of nonprofit, what the differences are between different kinds of nonprofits. For example, social service nonprofits typically do pay significantly less than other kinds of nonprofits, and that is just good information to know as you're getting started in this area.
Right. Just as an example for our listeners, I know, I've used GuideStar quite a bit, at least in the Memphis market, to research different salaries. And there are C-level executives at some of our bigger nonprofits here who probably make in the $200,000 to $300,000 per year range. But then there are some smaller nonprofits where they may only have a couple of employees, and that executive director or the CEO is making in the ballpark of $40,000 per year. And I think probably what you're sort of getting at is that, if the salary of the C-level person is quite high, and if they have quite a lot of money coming in donations, they may be able to support either more employees overall or higher employee salaries than a very small nonprofit that maybe can only have two people who are each making, say, $40,000. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
That's exactly right. I know when we benchmark salaries, we look at the size of organization, and bigger organizations typically do tend to pay more. as well as, again, sort of the type of organization it is, because even some small organizations, if they're, say, a small foundation or something else, might tend to pay more than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really helpful, especially if you're coming from for-profit and you really have no foundation or no sort of idea of how much you can expect at a nonprofit. I've spoken with job seekers a lot who say, I really want to work for a nonprofit. The only thing is I have to continue making the same amount of money I'm making today. And that can sometimes be unrealistic, as you mentioned. Well, you mentioned if a nonprofit is not quite for us, maybe the salary's not quite there or something else, that we can look for-profit organizations or companies that do align with our values. How can we identify those for-profit companies that align with our values? How can we find them?
Yeah. Several things to look at. I think the first thing I would look at is, what is the core business? Are they creating a product or service that you think has the potential to add value to the world versus as a sort of side distraction? Because you need to feel excited about selling whatever those things are, and if even if everything else about the company is great, if you don't think that you are adding value by the core business, I don't think you're going to feel quite as excited about your job. So after that, if you're excited about the core business, maybe it's a healthcare product or education product, or it's some sort of sustainable product that you think is really helpful to the world. I would then look at the CEO. Is this a leader who, in public speeches and talks with shareholders, are they bringing up sustainability or CSR or the kind of values you have? And by CSR, it stands for corporate responsibility. Are they speaking at conferences like Net Impact or BSR or GreenBiz or other conferences that bring in executives to talk about sustainability and CSR and different kinds of purpose and values? Because some CEOs really make this improving the world a cornerstone of what their company's all about, and some others don't at all. And that makes a huge difference in the corporate culture and what the employees are thinking about and doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just was going to bring one third item to do is obviously look online at their website, because while almost every company will have something about their values or sustainability on their website, there is a really huge variance in terms of the depth of that content. I've seen websites that have just a page or two about fairly traditional sounding programs like, we give money in our community and our employees volunteer once a year. And that kind of company is probably not fully embracing themselves and their opportunities to drive major environmental and social change in the world. But then other companies will have these dynamic, 100-page long reports about what they're doing and their goals and how they're achieving it. And I think you can get a good sense from those kinds of public reports that these are companies who've got really dynamic, integrated sustainability goals and priorities.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it sounds like, at the end of the day, doing research is the most helpful thing. And I like your suggestion on research the C-level executives. The last time I interviewed for a job, I did exactly what you described, and I found that person who was going to be interviewing me, who was a top-level executive, was being sued by their former employer. And as I learned more about it and as I went through the interview process, I realized just even on a personal level that probably our values were not on the same page. And I don't know, had I not done that research, I'm not sure I would have realized that.
That's a great warning sign to have found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, you really want to know that before you sort of sign up to be with a company for years at a time and to have that company's name sort of on your resume and on your work history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I know that Net Impact partners with some for-profit organizations. They come to your conferences and they speak, and I'm sure that the relationship is even deeper than that. What are some of the for-profit companies that you've partnered with over the years that have really impressed you in terms of, corporate responsibility and just, being a company that values ethics?
We have a number of corporate partners, typically 40 to 50 every year, and they can all be found on our website, netimpact.org. I try not to pick favorites.
Oh, okay.
but I will say something that might be a little bit controversial.
Okay.
We really work with a variety of companies. We have a philosophy that if a company wants to come to us and engage with our community, we want to talk to that company. And I would really encourage your listeners to keep an open mind when they're thinking about what companies they might want to work for and go beyond sort of popular opinion and brand perception. So, for example, we had a conference in San Jose a couple years ago, and we invited all the major technology companies to come speak and be a part of it. All the big companies that all the college students want to go work for and think are really amazing. And it just wasn't a priority for them. They were not that interested. Several of them are just not really doing that much, it turns out, in terms of sustainability, and they weren't wanting to engage with our community. That said, there are certainly some technology companies that are awesome. We work with SAP and Symantec, who've both done really meaningful partnerships with us in engaging people around important social issues. So I'm not trying to slam all tech companies, but when you dig beneath the hype, some of the companies you think might be doing cool things actually really aren't.
Wow, that's a really, really great point. I remember when I joined Net Impact in 2004, I think one of your partners at that time was the clothing company Patagonia. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know a lot about Patagonia. I still don't know a ton, but I mostly knew that they made really cool clothes. But through realizing that they had a partnership with Net Impact, it highlighted to me, wow, this company is one that maybe this is a real priority for them. Maybe this is a company I should be considering. So I think that's what's kind of interesting about, your website and the list that you mentioned, is that there are sometimes companies on there that you don't think of as like, this is a do-gooder kind of company or whatever. You just think, oh, they make interesting products. But when you see them on that list, it just shows that they are putting some thought around this issue, and I think that alone is really nice.
Absolutely, and I will say also that Patagonia, I forget the statistic, but they must get thousands of job applicants daily. In fact, I heard a story of someone who went into their parking lot in their headquarters and did a whole display about why they should work for Patagonia. So getting a job at Patagonia is coveted for that reason. That said, there are other companies that you perhaps wouldn't have thought of that are doing some really cool sustainability things like Unilever or 3M or Toyota, and those are all companies we partner with. And you might have a higher chance of having an opportunity at companies like that sometimes than some of them that are the most famous for this stuff.
Right. I think another one that I remember, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember that maybe Dow was a speaker at one of the conferences that I attended, and I remember thinking, wow, that's interesting because they're a chemical company. It's interesting that this would be an important issue to them, and it was interesting to kind of hear their perspective and how they were approaching it. I think that was the organization. Does that sound right? I'm not sure.
Yeah, actually, Dow and DuPont have both at different times gotten involved in our conference as well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think the potential that a company like Dow has to change the world through greener chemistry is huge. And even though there's been some controversial stories about companies like that in the past, if you get to a company like that and you are able to help them in making their chemistry products, for example, more sustainable, the impact that you can have on society is humongous, way more than you could have at, for example, a small local nonprofit, right? So I really do think that almost every company can have a huge impact on the world. So if you see that information on their website, you could get a sense that their leadership is committed to that. I would highly encourage folks to look at those companies, and not just for sustainability roles, but really in working in the main business. You can have a big opportunity to help drive companies on a more sustainable path.
No, absolutely. Well, so that kind of leads into my next question, which is, oftentimes we want to be at a company that more closely aligns to our goals, but sometimes we're not quite ready to leave yet. And so, we're trying to think of how could we make a difference in our own company. And I actually saw a talk that you did about sort of how to be disruptors in our own workplace where we work today. I'm wondering if you could share a few of your tips, on what we could do if we want to start to make change in our existing environment.
Absolutely. I think that there is huge potential to make change wherever you are. And I would say one of the first things to do is get a team together. You can be much more effective working with groups of like-minded employees, especially folks who are from different departments in a company. And then you have to pick the right goal. So this is where it could be really different depending on the culture of your company and where you are. Maybe it's something small just in your department about encouraging employees perhaps to change their commuting patterns or something like that. But maybe it's something bigger and your company is ready for employees to have a bold idea about how they can be more positive corporate citizens. When you pick the right goal, it's important to talk about it and tell the story. Get excited. I think that companies love seeing their employees engaged, and you can do creative things that raise awareness with lots of other employees and thus have a bigger impact. Also important is to make sure you've got management buy-in. So maybe that's your boss, or maybe that's someone even more senior. But it's important to be respectful of the fact that there are senior people at companies who like to think about things in hierarchy, and making sure that at least one of those people is on your team is also critical. But good news, we actually have a program rolling out on Earth Day this year, which would really be a great opportunity for all your listeners to try this at their current company. It's called Climate Disruptors, and the concept is that you have from Earth Day until September to get a group of people together and come up with a project that will reduce the carbon impact either of your company or via your employees in the community. And we will be rolling out all kinds of resources and templates to help people come up with ideas and projects, as well as connecting folks to speakers via webinars and other kinds of formats. And so we think it will be a really fun and easy way for people who are interested in the environment and maybe doing more to get their feet wet and hopefully do some really cool projects.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really, really good news. And I think it also highlights something else interesting about Net Impact, which is that you do have quite a few resources on your website. So even if maybe there's not a local chapter near where someone lives, you still offer quite a bit of information to help with programs like you just described.
Absolutely, yes. We know not everyone can get involved in a chapter because of where they are, or maybe they're busy with other commitments, and so we strive to support people through digital resources as well, which we are improving every day.
Sure. Well, that's really exciting. Thank you for sharing that. I know another thing that you have coming up in 2016 is you've got your national conference. And can you share a little bit about it? When is it? Where is it? And, what do we need to know about it?
Absolutely. It is November 3rd through 5th in Philadelphia. Anyone can attend. We are this year, in fact, having a special track for working professionals because often a lot of students come, and we want to make sure professionals also have a great experience. It's a really great place for job seekers to network and learn more about different opportunities to have impactful careers. It'll be 2.5 days, complete with keynotes and workshops and a networking and career expo as well. So it's really going to be a great event. I can't announce the keynotes quite yet because I'm not allowed to yet. But probably in May we'll be able to announce the keynotes. I can give you a picture though of some of the past.
Yeah, that would be great.
We typically like to really represent a range of sectors to show the range of ways that the audience can think of making an impact. We've had CEOs of major companies like Paul Pullman of Unilever, or Denise Morrison of Campbell Soup, or Jerry Stritzky from REI, who've all spoken in recent years. We've also had social sector leaders from foundations like Chelsea Clinton, who came last year, and also Sue Desmond-Hellman, who's the head of the Gates Foundation. And then we have less well-known names, people who are leaders in social entrepreneurship or social justice, like the CEOs of companies, smaller companies like Honest Tea or Revolution Foods or Happy Families, and also amazing nonprofit organizations like the Green Bronx Machine. So a real range of people who speak, and also a big range of different kinds of workshops and topics you can dive into at our conference. And so I would highly recommend it for all your listeners to come check it out.
Yeah, in terms of speakers, I remember one of the conferences that I went to for Net Impact, one of the, I think he was probably a keynote speaker, but was Bill Clinton. And, regardless of sort of your political views, I remember just being incredibly impressed that Net Impact could, draw someone of that caliber, and that I got the chance to kind of be in the audience and listen to their message. And so, I think for people who haven't heard about Net Impact, like looking up those speakers, and I just think you'll be really impressed. And the size of the conferences are very, relative to some other national conferences, they're smaller. And so you get a chance to meet more people and really, like you said, to network with a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm. Those are both great points, and we don't pay our speakers because we try to keep our ticket prices relatively affordable. So these are individuals who are passionate about trying to inspire and energize folks who want to change the world, and it's really an amazing group that comes to speak to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of questions. One is, do you have to be a Net Impact member to go to this conference?
You do not have to be. Our membership is currently free for the most part. You can sign up on our website, and so we do encourage people to sign up and be members and get our communications, which will keep you in the know about our conference and our Climate Disruptors program, and also our career resources and our job board and all that kind of stuff. So you should be a member, but you don't have to be a member to come to our conference.
Well, one thing I like that you mentioned is that your ticket prices are very reasonable. I've been to lots of national conferences, and this is one that, even if your work doesn't pay for it, it's not going to break the bank to be able to go to this conference.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you sign up on our early side. I think registration's opening in probably by the time this podcast is live at netimpact.org, and our cheapest tickets are in the first couple weeks of registration opening.
Okay, yeah. Well, so you mentioned that there's like a career fair at the conference. How many companies typically participate, and what kinds of companies are usually there?
We have between 80 and 100 typically, and some of them are recruiting. Some of them would call it more networking and sharing what they do, because they might not be bring their recruiters per se, but regardless, it's good networking for all the companies and organizations. We have a mix. We have big companies come. We have small nonprofits come. We have social purpose businesses attend, and even universities attend as well. So it's a great opportunity to get to talk to people maybe from companies that you've never considered as a place you might want to work, and learn their stories and learn how their recruiting works, as well as what they're focused on in terms of sustainability and corporate responsibility.
Yeah, so career fairs are one of my favorite things. And I'm always trying to convince people to go to career fairs. And one response that I sometimes get is, gosh, I'm not in college anymore. I feel too old to go to a career fair. What age group do you find goes to your career fair? Is it all ages, or is it mostly college students?
Our conference is predominantly graduate and undergrad students. That said, we have about 1,000 professionals who are there. I will say, though, that the recruiters often tell me they wish there were more experienced people that they would talk to, because not everyone wants to recruit just a recent college grad. So we are working on ways to make that more clear to the audience about who they're looking to recruit. But, regardless, these companies do hire experienced people, and meeting someone, even if they don't have a job open, as you well know, Angela, could lead to something over time.
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing that I just had this conversation last week with some people, because there are a lot of career fairs going on this time of year. And, my argument is, gosh, I know that you're not in college anymore, but are you really going to turn down the chance to be in a room with like 100 HR people? Like, you're beating your head against the wall trying to apply online, and there's an event where these people are together and you can meet them in person.
Exactly. And, one example is we had Amazon there last year, which, again, might not be a company you necessarily first associate with sustainability, but they are doing really some amazing things up in Seattle. And they were really there for experienced hires, and they would have loved more experienced hires to came to the reception they hosted. So we're hopefully getting them back next year, and they'll be there. I'm looking to talk to people with experience.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm curious, and, either way is perfectly fine, but do you offer a ticket that's only for your career fair, or is the ticket for the whole conference altogether?
We are talking about that right now. We haven't finished our pricing. We are going to be offering limited tickets, which are just for our keynote and our keynote room, for those who just want a flavor of the conference versus the whole experience. But I can't tell you if we're going to have just an expo ticket yet. But if you check out our website in a few weeks, it will all be clear.
Oh, good. Well, that's great news. I'm trying to think, is there anything else about Net Impact that, we should take away today or that would be important to keep in mind as we are sort of job searching and we're looking for something, again, that more closely aligns with our goals?
Well, I think I would mention that I really view, impact through your career as a long-term project and not something that might happen overnight or not something that you might solve in a couple months. I know a lot of folks who got into more meaningful jobs by doing projects in their current work environment, whatever it is, and demonstrating that they really did care about different issues, and then eventually were able to do more of that in their full-time role or switch jobs. So I would encourage folks to be patient, to look for unexpected opportunities to make impact no matter where they are, and to keep at it. I mean, it might be something that gets frustrating and is hard. I know it's hard, but once you get to that kind of job where you feel like you're in sync with your values and really making a contribution to the world, I think there is nothing more meaningful and rewarding that you can achieve.
I totally agree. And you made a couple of really great points during our conversation. One is the being patient. It just takes time. And the other was starting to establish relationships with people. I mean, you can't always expect that you're going to meet someone and they're going to give you a job next week. But if you stay in touch with them, you may build a relationship. And in a year or 2 years, that may turn into something interesting.
Exactly.
Well, where can our listeners go to learn more about Net Impact?
You can check us out online at netimpact.org and sign up for our free membership, affiliate with a local chapter if you want, and tell us what you're interested in hearing more about. We do have a job board on the website as well. You can also follow us on Twitter at NetImpact, or I'm at Liz Ma, too.
Awesome. Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining me. This has been great. It was so nice to meet you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher so you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.